The whole story is also linked to time, and I think overarching theme of your podcast, Jelena, pertains to sovereignty, I believe. And I think we all roads lead to sovereignty for people, and they're linked to the preservation of our health and the growing of wealth. And there's a bigger story to be told in both respects. You mentioned my connection with Bitcoin. That was part of my, shall we say, legal corporate journey, where I essentially settled on the hardest form of money ever invented, which in my opinion is the greatest invention since the printing press. And I think humanity will converge upon that sooner rather than later. And the health perspective is also linked to time. So health and wealth obviously bleed into each other. And I figured if I nail those two pillars in my life, I could do whatever I please. But the irony is, this journey has been so transformative for me that I've discovered things about myself, met people like you, traveled around the world and see things, and I just see the world so differently than I did 15, 20 years ago. So I think if you want people to have an overarching health message to put on their wall or to tattoo on themselves, I'd say reduce the distance between your respiratory proteins, increase the spin rate of your ATP synthase to make quantum tunneling simple. That is quantum biology in a nutshell. I think this is the conventional conversation that should be had. All people should be quote unquote mitochondriacs. We should be optimizing our mitochondrial health as best as possible. So what we're dealing with is essentially an aspect of the body that is central to everything, and it's totally forgotten about. If people want to learn more about it, I'd recommend looking into the works of Nick Lane. He's a guy that really taught me a lot about mitochondria.
Welcome back to Limitless, the podcast where we explore the ideas, science, and experiences that expand our understanding of ourselves and what's truly possible. My goal with the podcast is to bring you conversations that challenge conventional thinking and then inspire your curiosity and then empower you to take a greater ownership of your health, your mind, your life. And today's guest has a truly unique background. Don Moss combines law and biomedical science, leadership, and Bitcoin and quantum biology into a fascinating perspective on human health and performance. And in his book, The Quantum Biology Standard, he explores how light, water, magnetism, mitochondria, and our modern environment may play a much greater role in our health that we have traditionally been taught. So whether you're passionate about longevity, optimizing your health, or simply curious about emerging ideas that challenge the status quo, you are going to enjoy today's conversation. And before we start, I just would love to mention that Don and I met on the investment networking, and we very easily established a connection, and we understood that we have the same idea about health, and that's why this podcast episode was timed. I welcome Don to the podcast, and it's a really pleasure to have you here. I'm very excited about the topics that we are going to uncover today. Welcome.
Thank you, Jelena. It is an honor and privilege to be here. And as you mentioned, we did cross paths at the investment club not so long ago. And I was drawn to you straight away because I thought, hey, this is a non-conventional thinker, because she's wearing a certain kind of glasses that really resonate with my non-conventional worldview. So we have to strike up a conversation and see how we can share ideas and cross-pollinate. I just had to verify that we were on the same wavelength, and fortunately for us both, I was. So it's an honor and privilege to be here, and thank you for the kind words and kind introduction.
Yeah, so beautiful. Immediately after we connected through WhatsApp, you have sent me your book, The Quantum Biology Standard, and this is going to be the core of our conversation today. And I believe it's the core of what you are passionate, how you see life, how you see health. I resonate so much with things that you're saying in that book. I would love, however, that our listeners and viewers know a little bit more about you and your journey. And so you have a very unique background, as I was mentioning. So from law and biomedical science to Bitcoin and now quantum biology, and everything came together in your mind and you put it on the paper. And so when you look back, what was the turning point that made you question the conventional understanding of health and life and ultimately led you to write this book?
These are super questions. I think it all started from a personal health journey of my own. As a child, I was somewhat overweight, and although I was fit, I could play sport, I was always a little bit chunky, and I always wondered what I could do about this. And initially you jump into the initial model, or the obvious model of like calories in, calories out, this first sort of thermodynamics basically, so to get physical on you early. Work expended, the difference between work expended and energy added, that's the conventional wisdom. And then slowly but surely, as I started to peel the layers of the onion back, I wound up at ketosis, which I found to be interesting. Now, the irony is, I slowly came to the realization again that that was relevant and it was effective, but not for the reasons I thought it was. And that was part of the reason I ultimately ended up at quantum biology. Quantum biology in and of itself is quite an emerging field. It's not conventional nutritional wisdom, so to speak, but I feel based on my trial and error and scientific understanding of things that it deserves far more airtime than it gets. And it's helped people in my life. I've advised people in my life with it, and they've taken a lot of benefit from it as well. And I'd love to share that message with the world. There's others out there that do so. My, shall we say, role model in the space is a guy named Dr. Jack Kruse, who's also a Bitcoiner. The whole story is also linked to time. And I think overarching theme of your podcast, Jelena, pertains to sovereignty, I believe. And I think we all roads lead to sovereignty for people, and they're linked to the preservation of our health and the growing of wealth. And there's a bigger story to be told in both respects. You mentioned my connection with Bitcoin. That was part of my, shall we say, legal corporate journey, where I essentially settled on the hardest form of money ever invented, which in my opinion is the greatest invention since the printing press. And I think humanity will converge upon that sooner rather than later. And the health perspective is also linked to time. So health and wealth obviously bleed into each other. And I figured if I nail those two pillars in my life, I could do whatever I please. But the irony is, this journey has been so transformative for me that I've discovered things about myself, met people like you, traveled around the world and seen things, and I just see the world so differently than I did 15, 20 years ago. So long story short, we are carbon-based semiconductors. That's the message I want to spread in this interview with you. Start thinking of yourself as a pumper of electrons and question everything you know, and really try and value your time. Time is the best currency, and I still think time is the best currency. Bitcoin's the second best currency, and you can only enjoy your time if you're healthy, and that will expound upon the health aspect of things as we progress.
Wow, you touched so many things. I realize, and we all kind of know, that the greatest transformations come from the challenges that we face in life. And so you were mentioning that there were certain challenges in your life. Then when you started to dive a little bit deeper and try to apply different approach to life and to health so that you can kind of get better. And it's also very nice for me to listen from somebody who has a background and can actually go deeper and have a profound understanding of the processes that are happening in our body. I myself did my own research, did a small course on the cellular metabolism and mitochondria and everything, so I do really can follow, but I'm absolutely fascinated, and you definitely broke that belief of mine that everybody who is in the medical science normally gets in that space or the paradigm that the science is conveying nowadays, and that it's hard for people who are deep into the science and the medical schools to get out of this mindset and bring something new. So you definitely broke or changed the belief that those who are involved in the medical schools cannot have any other opinion. So I really love that. Can you, for those who do not know about quantum biology, how would you explain that to anybody who is kind of amateur in this area? What does it, and why is it so important to get this understanding? You were mentioning electrons and everything, but maybe you could get a simple explanation of what it is.
I think anyone that's tried to describe quantum physics generally simply struggles to do so. Things are not real. We live in this spooky action at a distance world. Guys like Heisenberg and the likes that people probably know about, and there's a lot of dispute about how it actually works in practice. People don't actually know. But I want to touch on the point you mentioned previously regarding conventional medicine. It's a bit of a story. So I think this is the conventional conversation that should be had. All people should be quote unquote mitochondriacs. We should be optimizing our mitochondrial health as best as possible. And I think that's a story that's been lost arguably since the early 1900s, after the publication of a thing called the Flexner Report in the US, which essentially directed medical schools to change their curriculum to avoid the discussion of these things. If you go back in history, photobiology and heliotherapy were central to the Egyptians. They had a city called Heliopolis, which literally in Greek means the city of the sun. Indians have the sun salute. Hippocrates integrated the sun in his medical training. Even here in Switzerland, where we both live, Jelena, heliotherapy was used by guys like Augustin Rollier to cure tuberculosis. And through a graduated protocol, he fixed people with chronic diseases above a certain altitude where the atmosphere isn't as thick and the UV rays can penetrate the skin deeper. That has been lost, and I think that's part of a deeper conspiratorial conversation, for lack of a better term. That also bleeds back into my background because I'm inherently distrusting, and that's part of my Bitcoin story as well, where I discovered the magic of unconfiscatable wealth, having seen my own family's wealth in a democratic state being compulsorily acquired whilst studying a law degree. I was thinking to myself, how does this work? So it's kind of like you asked earlier, how do you learn what's part of the journey? I think pain is the best teacher. Had I not seen that, I wouldn't even discover what unconfiscatable wealth is, or let alone understand the importance of it. And that bleeds into being a bit more distrusting and understanding. It's doing trial and error in your own health journey and thinking, hey, maybe I don't need to have a box of cereal every day. And ultimately leads to quantum biology. Quantum biology is essentially, in this context, what I said to you earlier, the movement of electrons. We are not a bag of chemicals. The first law of thermodynamics doesn't really stand up in our bodies. We're not calories in, calories out. We are all about how we move electrons. We think as humans that we've developed the best semiconductors using silicon. Nature makes no mistakes, Jelena. We have adapted over, if you're not religious, we've adapted over millions of years to become carbon-based semiconductors because carbon is the ultimate hermaphrodite on the periodic table, meaning it can adopt many forms because it has 4 valence electrons, and it can be a man, it can be a woman, it can be a they, them, it can be, for modern audiences, it can be whatever it wishes. So quantum biology challenges conventional wisdom in this regard, and essentially what the proponents teach is we need to optimize the ability of our body to transfer electrons, and that is done through mitochondria and other things that we'll get into. But we need to focus more on that. And I tell everyone when introducing this topic, I tell them light is more important than food. Like if you have a terrible light environment, it does not matter what you eat. That applies likewise. So if you have a terrible diet, the light can actually offset the damage you're causing.
Very interesting. Also, it's somewhat demanding for my understanding, but I would love just to reflect briefly on what you were saying, that we are slightly, or you are slightly distrusting, and your parents are from Greece. I am originally from Serbia. Do you think that there is something in this area that we are just built like that, or it just depends on the person?
I think it definitely, and I say this to other people in, shall we say, more developed economies who have more trusting systems. You are encouraged to cheat the system in these countries, and therefore you always have to be on guard. So I warn people, when I take them to Greece, you're going to see a different Don. Like, I'm going to be an asshole. Like, I need to do this, otherwise people will trample all over me, and I'm sure you're the same. So I don't think it's wide within us, it's conditioning. It's this game theory where you're actually not behaving well. And I think that bleeds into incentives, and incentives dictate outcomes, as my favorite investor, Charlie Munger, says. And if you look at modern financial and health systems, those incentives are completely warped. And that's why we have the current system that we do in many respects.
I love your explanation. Yeah, it is that the systems that we are living in are pushing us to kind of survive. It's a bit of survival mode, and then you start to think for yourself. And people who have more stable economies than they are, as you said as well, they're trusting more the system. And there is a real gap also when these two mindsets meet. It might be challenging to, find the common thing, because it's just really coming from different perspectives. But I love your explanation. So you're carbon-based conductors. Okay,
yes.
So let me tell you something I know, so then you can please make it sound correct scientifically. So I have learned that somewhere in the past, the mitochondria was a separate part. It was somewhere in the evolution, mitochondria and the cell united. So mitochondria is the only piece of our body that can take oxygen, and the rest of the body is actually using carbon dioxide. Am I right here? You can maybe elaborate on this. I don't think that many people know actually how did our cell evolve. So now the cell definitely contains a couple of these mitochondria. So maybe you want to let us know some basics so that people can understand their bodies better.
Absolutely. I'll go on a little bit of a rant about mitochondria, and you've touched on it very correct. That is accurate. There were two cells essentially that merged in prehistoric times to form eukaryotes, mitochondria and archaea together, and we form multicellular organisms from unicellular roots, I guess, are essentially the powerhouse of the cell. What they do is produce a chemical called adenosine triphosphate, and that is done through cellular respiration. Now, think of these as like the petrol tickets you need to start your car. So for your body to tick over, you need to make these things called ATP. So it stands to reason that mitochondria is super important. Would you believe, Jelena, that for people willing to commit suicide, sadly, if they want to do so, they take a cyanide pill. Do you know what cyanide acts on? It acts on cytochrome C oxidase, which is the fourth protein complex it essentially stops cellular respiration by killing that reaction. So it's not like, that's what it targets. So what we're dealing with is essentially an aspect of the body that is central to everything, and it's totally forgotten about. If people want to learn more about it, I'd recommend looking into the works of Nick Lane. He's a guy that really taught me a lot about mitochondria. What we're trying to do is optimize mitochondrial health. There's a lot of ways we can do this. There's a lot of things about the modern world that are designed to destroy mitochondrial health. I can talk to you about melanin for hours. I can talk to you about deuterium for hours. We can talk to you about cancer and oncogenesis. If people optimize for mitochondrial health, they will go a long way for improving themselves and being sovereign in this world that, as you said earlier, does not want us to be sovereign. We are meant to be low dopamine idiots, compliant idiots. That's another story as well. That's linked to the blue light story. That's linked to World War II, Nazi surgeons, Las Vegas. That's a deep story. But you and I are meant to be compliant fools that are bending over non-stop for the powers that be to be dependent on them. Mitochondria, taking control of your mitochondria, we can go into ways how you can do that. This is integral to people managing their health.
Well, I would actually really propose that we dive a little bit deeper and you can help others to understand what they can do about their health.
Would you like some scientific background or more practical things people can do?
It's up to you. I would definitely give some practical things so that they can implement. I believe if you want to prevent anything, you're doing this all the time, not only when you're sick. Please give us a little bit of the scientific background as well as some practical tips.
So I think if you want people to have an overarching health message to put on their wall or to tattoo on themselves, I'd say reduce the distance between your respiratory proteins, increase the spin rate of your ATP synthase to make quantum tunneling simple. That is quantum biology in a nutshell. Now, how you do this, let's get into the fun stuff for your audience because the science stuff can be a bit messy.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to do. You can solve 80% of your problems by, quote unquote, making like the Sphinx and eating like a shark. That means every morning, I want you, Jelena, to get on all fours, outside, on grass, face the sun for 20 to 30 minutes. I also want you to eat seafood. I want you to eat wild salmon. I want you to undergo cold thermogenesis because that shrinks the size of the distance between these proteins. I want you to eat a ketogenic diet. I want you to avoid non-native EMFs. I want you to avoid wireless headphones like the plague. I want you to avoid Wi-Fi like the plague. I want you to touch grass. I want you to receive electrons from the earth because that's what you're doing when you're grounding. You are essentially charging yourself with grass. Same goes for swimming outdoors. I want you to drink carbonated water like the Soviets knew. So the Soviets knew about this 50, 60 years ago, and they would have around the streets to help their workers deplete themselves of deuterium. I want you to chew mastic gum. I want you to avoid blue light like the plague after night time. I want you to wear glasses like these, blue light blockers. After dark, I want you to wear the amber glasses that you were wearing, Jelena, when I first met you. During the day, when in rooms, I want you to replace light bulbs. These are all incandescent bulbs. Even behind this laptop, I've got an incandescent bulb. You can still find them. I'd even recommend nicotine's good. Nicotine's good. It shrinks the distances between respiratory proteins. Methylene blue is also good. That's why it works. You don't have to smoke to have nicotine. You can also eat tomatoes, and there's other sources of nicotine you can have. These things, all in isolation, we've all probably learnt about them in our health journey, but they're all linked to mitochondria because of the reasons I've said in terms of those respiratory proteins. They all work. For instance, my keto journey I thought I was a genius on keto. I'm like, I was partially, but it wasn't for the reasons I thought. It was because, I guess, fats produce less deuterium when they're metabolized than carbohydrates. It's a complex story, but the key thing is, Jelena, for your people to take home is the sun. There is no alternative. You need the sun. And in high latitudes such as ours, like I feel this relocating from Australia to Zurich, like you feel the change in your body. You need to often consider relocating to a different latitude if you want to preserve that health, because UV is central to everything. UV creates melanin. Melanin is the juice that carries everything around our body. And the way the world's built today is designed to destroy that melanin. Blue light destroys melanin. Imagine something that is in your room. I think every electronic device should have like a warning like cigarettes do on them. It's like, this is harmful to health, because it is. And people don't understand it. It's all over us. So there are those things. I think they would be practically what I think people should do.
Yeah, fantastic. I would really recommend everybody who is just starting to start small, to start implement piece by piece, so that we get overwhelmed sometimes. So just take something with you, what you can do now, and then add up so it becomes a natural part of how you live your everyday life. What I also would love to hear from you is, what do you think, or how is your perspective on metabolism of the sugar and the fat? I really think that people don't know that. Okay, you can always correct me, but for me there are two major sources of production of ATP, which is glucose, and then there is also fat or ketones. And you can also add or elaborate a little bit on the usage of the proteins to convert them into energy. But I really realized when I talk to people that they don't understand these very basic things, that you can use glucose for creating energy, and you can use fat to create energy. People also associate fat. If I eat fat, I'm going to get fat. What I have learned as well is that taking fat to convert that into the ATP is kind of faster, easier process for the cell. Also, that instead of you putting the glucose in your system, your body can, without you eating glucose, produce enough glucose or exactly amount that your body needs. So you will never have too much sugar in your blood. So in my eyes, it seems like much healthier approach of eating and getting the energy into your body and the system, instead of feeding yourself with the glucose. So it would be nice if you can tell your perspective on that, and why, if it's true, why is it so?
Absolutely. Well, this goes back to what I said at the start about the paradigms of modern medicine changing around 120 years ago. The notion of fats being bad only started happening with the industrialization of food. If you understand ketones, the way they work, they are a far more sustainable fuel. This idea of having 3 meals a day is also nonsense. In what universe is that? Are you saying that people would kill animals at 3 times a day in the savannah and then rejoice every 6 hours and eat? That's not how it works. To your point, yes, fats, it takes a little bit of time for people to get adapted to it, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 days, and that's what stops people. There is also a link between glucose metabolism, fat metabolism, and oncogenesis, so cancer, which could be a conversation for another podcast. I feel people that experience those crashes from glucose or those sicknesses really should look at ketosis. I did the same thing. I feel the pathways are respectively, in order to burn fat, you use a thing called beta oxidation. The body uses that. The body consumes glucose, so carbs. It's got a store of it in its body, glycogen. Once that empties, the body starts using fat. So once you've completely depleted yourself of glycogen, then you start turning into a fat burner. What I would say to people is it is a far more sustainable energy source, such that Before I did keto, I could work 15-hour days, I could run, I had no problem with after transitioning to keto. And the benefits compound, Jelena. So to advance like this Einstein stuff I've been talking about, Einstein said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And I firmly believe that. The longer you do keto, the longer you do intermittent fasting, the better your body gets used to it. It wards off disease. This is all correct. You are barking up the right tree. I was where you were. And then I realized it's not what I think it is, because those biochemical pathways that I studied at university, they're correct. All those things are correct. But it's all linked to mitochondria. Because when we are metabolizing either glucose or fat, when the mitochondria does it, it produces water. And this water that's produced is often laden with a thing called deuterium, which is an isotope of hydrogen. It's double the weight of hydrogen. So you can imagine when you're eating carbs and fat, you want to pick which one would produce the least deuterium because it makes your mitochondria work best. You don't want your electrons swimming around in like maple syrup. You want it to be in this nice, quick space where they can move quickly. Now, this is the fun part. Metabolizing fats produces almost half the deuterium that carbs does for the mitochondria. And that's the magic of keto. So the ketone body's working on the brain, fantastic, that's proven. You and I know this. But from a cellular perspective, that's the guts of keto. That is why it's so much better, and it's got to do with deuterium depletion.
Amazing. Thank you so much for confirming my thesis and explaining them a bit more scientifically. What I would also love to touch on, because we talk here about the food that we are taking so that we can produce energy, but then you have said a couple of times that we are batteries. You are also speaking about magnetism, the importance of the light. So do you want also to shine a little bit light in that area where people do not really understand that the light is also the source of the energy and how it helps the whole cell and the mitochondria?
Absolutely. So there's a thing called the photoelectric effect that was discovered by Einstein. He basically said when light touches something, it spits off electrons. Now, for us, when we receive UV light, the sun is the source of UV light. That or food is split by light into hydrogen, oxygen, and 4 electrons. Now, this UV light can only be absorbed by melanin. Melanin and UV light, are you sensing a theme here? So things that we've been told by the world, like the sun, wear sunscreen, wear sunglasses, things that block the UV. These are things that are designed to stop you from being the best battery you can be. Because if you're not splitting the water or the food that you're consuming into electrons, there's no electrons going around your body. And the more you go into it, there's a deeper architecture around the world that is designed to stop this. The laptops you and I are looking at now without blue blockers or filters are destroying the melanin. And the melanin is the thing that basically creates this beautiful ecosystem in our body that spreads the electrons around. So I would say the link to light, that's the first part of it. And the second part is the water part. So in our bodies, water changes, Jelena. So when light hits it, water changes in our bodies. And the way the water changes, it makes it in a way that allows electrons to flow really nicely. So it's not H2O, it becomes something else. So when I say there is no alternative for the light, I genuinely mean that. It's a far more complex biology than people realize. And it was in the Bible, Jelena, Genesis chapter 1 verse 3, let there be light. It really is that simple. But we've complicated it with pills and other things to sell things. But unfortunately, I have nothing to sell you, Jelena, but these ideas. And I think the sun is the best medicine. There's a reason they say sunlight is the best disinfectant. There is so much wisdom in these cliches.
I agree with you. I think the nature is always the answer. You just have to get in tune with it. Also be in nature and learn natural laws in any sense. And as we distance ourselves from there, we get lost. And everything gets more complicated. And this is where I think the confusion also starts for people. Because they will get so much information on how you should live or eat, and there are so many different advices, but if you're looking really for the simple and real answers, you should be studying the nature and you will find all the answers there. I started my supplement brand, which is mixed beef organs, so those are the real organs from the grass-fed cows, such as the liver, heart, kidneys as well. Did you have your experience on eating the organs? And what is your opinion about the nutritional value, if there is any opinion of yours?
There is a strong opinion. I am a crazy, wherever possible, a carnivore guy. And I've tried eating organs, but if I'm traveling, I find them difficult to source and difficult to eat. Things like livers and hearts, I've delved in them and I understand there are significant benefits relative to just having normal meat. And I think it's fantastic what you're doing by making that far more accessible for lazy people that like me that don't want to taste the organs where all the juice, where all the good stuff is. And so I definitely see the merit in that. And in a basic way, those organs deliver exponentially more benefits for your body than just basic beef. And basic beef is already incredible. Basic lamb is amazing. So I've done carnivore for a very long time. When I travel, Jelena, I go to like McDonald's in countries where I can't eat the food and I just ask for patties of meat. I just get 5 or 6 patties of meat and I just eat them. And they say, is this for the dog? And I say, it's not for the dog, it's for me. They'll laugh at me. They'll be like, whatever you're cooking back there, that's not real food, mate. That's not real food. But I think it's slowly entering people's psyche. They're starting to realize, hey, we've got all this information, we've got all this scientific knowledge, we've got all these amazing foods. I walk into a supermarket, Jelena, and I think I'm allergic to 99% of things. It's all industrial crap. And the things that they say are in there, they can legally slant the definitions. And that's why products such as yours are what people need.
As I say, I think the nature is always right. You can always try to outperform the nature, bring some biohacking technologies and everything. I genuinely believe some of them can do what they promise, but I also believe that there are many things around that are treating symptoms mostly. Imagine you have different kind of supplements, and sometimes people say, oh, I feel better after 3 days. So for me, the question arises, did you treat your symptoms or did you fix your body? If I just try to think logically, I probably would believe that in 3 days I can't fix anything, because the body needs the time to recover. Even if you get everything right, you give it all right things, you remove all things that you don't need, body and needs some processes to start to renew itself. And so for me, nothing in 3 days can work. In 3 days, yes, you can maybe treat some symptoms, but you cannot fix the root cause and you cannot renew your body. So nothing against anybody, but I just think it's so valuable to start to think for yourself. What does it make sense? Why do I get fast results? And for me, this means really treating symptoms. And if I want long-term success in my health or anything, then this is the discipline and doing the right things. And for example, feeding the body right elements. So thank you for supporting my idea. It also made me confident in what I was doing and also allowing me not to get it overcomplicated. I guess many people would start creating supplements and they would say, okay, I will need a couple of scientists, I would need many clinical trials and everything, but I felt kind of relieved because I knew when I go back to the nature and offer this simple solution, we cannot miss it. We can actually probably outperform others, but it made it simple. So I really think the way to simplicity is always the nature.
Absolutely right. I think what you're harking on is sovereignty. All roads lead to sovereignty. And what you're doing really well is nature makes no mistakes and nature doesn't pity fools. So if you don't go down these rabbit holes and you don't learn about yourself, you die, Jelena. You might not physically die tomorrow, but you will pay the price in 5, 10 or 20 years. And I think it takes, this is what I was referring to about earlier, that time. That time thing is so important because you need the time to invest and understand this and have the courage to do what you've done. And I guess be non-conventional in that regard. And in terms of other biohacking things you touched on earlier, I firmly agree with leveraging the power of organ meats to fuel a ketogenic, mitochondriac-friendly diet. You mentioned being in nature. Part of the reason things like red light therapy work is because 40% of the sun is essentially red or near infrared A rays. Those things, when people take them correctly, those devices themselves are fraught with danger. They're not very good. They can cause flicker if they're not made properly, and they can cause cellular stress and do more harm than good. But if you get a really, really, really good one, they work on mitochondria as well. So what I mentioned before, cytochrome C oxidase, the thing that the cyanide pills work on, they actually have receptors. They have copper and heme receptors that absorb these chromophores. And what they do is they release this thing called nitric oxide that's been blocking the mitochondria from working properly and release it into the bloodstream. So it's two things. It allows the mitochondria to start working again. It's like blocks the fuel pump, unblocks the fuel pump, but also what it releases actually makes our blood vessels relax. Nitric oxide is a calmant, and it's like, hey, it's like this, nature knows this thing that we need. It's like, how does it know to not only unblock the fuel pump? It's like fixing your fuel pump, Jelena, and whatever you remove, putting it in the car, and then that works even better as well. So the body works in marvelous ways. Humans have studied this for thousands of years and played around with ideas. There's a reason humans have converged on things like the sun and being outside, as simple as it sounds, and boring. It's not this sexy solution we can sell to people. It is what it is, and incentives in the world are aligned in such a way that you're not actually rewarded for pushing that quote-unquote narrative. It's like fish don't know they swim in water. Do we know what we're swimming in? Because it's all we've known. It's all our parents and our grandparents have known. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much for support. I somewhere understood that this is my truth, and I really believe it's universal truth, but not everybody is ready to hear it. And so I don't try to push any narrative to anybody, but I know what is my truth, and I really love to spread about it. And as you are also applying all what you have learned to your body, I did apply these strategies to heal myself from something that was not curable, such as tinnitus or tinnitus. It's considered not curable, and I just know it works. And I allowed myself not to be emotionally attached to the narrative that doesn't serve me or goes against what I think. I also don't get too much emotionally involved if people do not understand it, because I believe everybody has his own path, and there is a right time for right information. So when it's the right time, you will get the right information and you will be able to act on it. This brings me to another question, as a bit outside of this conversation about science. To me, it sounds so logical that when you are searching for a solution, as for example, you have some health issue, as we also have had, I was desperate for a solution. And then you find something that you slowly start to understand. And my action was, I'm going to do everything. So I heard, I understood, I truly believe it's going to help me, and so I took immediate action, and I was really pushing myself every day to do as many things as I could, which means just what you have already said, being outside on the sun, on the grass, going in the cold water, removing sugars, and all of the things that you were saying. But what I was trying to say is, like, I just did it. I wanted to fix it, and I wanted to live different life, free from tinnitus or the sound that was very disturbing. So what is it in the people that prevents them to take action? Is it the pain not significant enough? Is it that they are just so used to live comfortable lives? Is it that they believe more mainstream narrative? What does prevent them to do these steps? Because nothing against anybody. I'm so grateful for my path and that I'm healthy now, but I know a couple of people who have tinnitus, and sometimes tinnitus is it's a moderate, or it's like just very silent, so it doesn't really disturb that much. But there are people who have a really very loud tinnitus, which is 24/7, and this is influencing the quality of your life immensely, not a little bit, immensely. So what is in people that stops them to take action, even when they get right information?
Super question, Jelena. I think it's, at its core, it's a lack of self-love. That's a very deep thing that's a thing we need to probe. And I think that lack of self-love and essentially low self-esteem, it's a product of myriad things where people are exposed to in their lives. It's their family life, it's their friends, it's their work, etc. So they don't actually think they're worthy deep down of bettering yourself. Whatever reason, thank goodness that you managed to do the things you do, because deep within you, there was something that felt the need that, so I'm better than this, I deserve better than this, and I will act accordingly. So if some people go and find the knowledge and they still don't act on it, that's fine. Some people find the knowledge, they probe every rabbit hole until they actually end up finding where they need to be. So that's I think the psychological answer. Scientifically, I think that mental health has a big link to the blue light, fake light prisons we live in today. Why? Because those things destroy dopamine. Dopamine, I said to you before about low dopamine idiots walking around everywhere, wearing sunglasses and sunscreen. This is the same thing. The depression comes from the destruction of the leptin-melanocortin pathway, which destroys melanin. And it's all linked to this story. So I think you can't have one without the other. When people are low on dopamine and looking on social media to pump up their dopamine because the world has destroyed their dopamine scientifically, they lose their self-love and they get it's this vicious cycle. So I think there's a scientific part that people haven't really probed, which is linked to this quantum biology story, but also the social familial aspect, which makes people hesitant or incapable of acting, knowing what they're worth, or what they feel like they deserve, what they should have. And it's unfortunately, it becomes a vicious cycle, and people have to be ready to be helped. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You touched on this before. So it's like one hand has to wash the other. It's got to be this magnetic force that brings people together.
Yeah. I always find it kind of sad, but it is what it is. People are willing to help themselves or not, and they're willing to see a little bit further and deeper or not. And when they are ready to listen to information, then they are ready. And we are here to say this information or give it to them if they are willing to receive it. I would also love to ask the question that is, in a way, tricky one, but from very simple perspective, where mitochondria is the only part of the body who is using oxygen, and then knowing that cancer cells operate only, they don't use oxygen anymore, I would then say that in those cells, the mitochondria died or stopped working completely. How do you see the cancer in itself from this perspective or any other?
Yep, I think it's very much linked to mitochondrial health. Well, it's linked to what I touched earlier, water produced by mitochondria that contains deuterium. What ends up happening is, it's a complex scientific story, but the mitochondria, when things are all good, we are making 36 ATP for each glucose that we get, basically. Now, when your mitochondrial machinery messes up because the biological water isn't working properly, those proteins aren't working, they're too far apart, there's no quantum tunneling, that ATP synthase that creates the ATP is really slow because of deuterium. It means the body shifts from oxidative phosphorylation, so using oxygen to make ATP, into anaerobic respiration. So you go from making 36 ATP to making 2 ATP. So you become horrendously inefficient. You start operating in a glycolytic environment. It's called the Warburg shift. This is due to basically the mitochondria leaking out things and the body trying to react to produce more and more mitochondria to make up for this. So essentially, the engine is busted. Now, that's why I'm so adamant that keto has been proven to stop cancers, but this is why I think that's a bit of a blind spot on people. And the link is to deuterium. There's a lot of studies by Hungarian guys like Somlyi and some other guys in the last 20 or 30 years that have proven this. This has been somewhat blunted by mainstream medicine. But imagine that, like you're going from 36 ATP to 2 ATP. Your body's just gonna start doing things to make itself better and respond. And that's why you have this crazy mushrooming of cells. And that's why mitochondriacs know the way. You're on the right path. Ketogenic diet, that's the right path. But there's one more step that we've missed. And this is the why. If you're interested in the why, it's great. But the TLDR for the audience is just eat meat and go outside. Like, it'll be fine. The rest will work itself out.
You see, it's actually very simple. That's what I say. I think the answer is always very simple. Just have to go to the root. I love that. So my podcast is called Limitless, and we speak here normally more about personal growth and understanding who we are in our nature as a humans, that we also have spiritual level, which is very powerful. So instead of doing always the action, like moving things and producing stuff and creating your work, many things are moved and created from mind or the spirit. So you spoke a lot about, is this something that goes in this direction of understanding ourselves as there is no limit to us in terms of our health, well-being, personal growth? Does this goes in the same direction for you as well?
Absolutely. So those two pillars of sovereignty, health and wealth, you leverage those, you can use the most powerful thing ever, your time. You use your time in your best way. You leave Jelena's fingerprint on the world, my fingerprint on the world. Those two things allow you to do it. Knowledge is power. Another cliche. It's really true. Knowledge is power for both. You want to become sovereign financially, that can be through running a business or owning wealth that cannot be confiscated and having long-term thinking. You can be sovereign with your health by adopting the protocols you and I have touched on today. That is what makes you limitless. But these two pieces need to come together. But in order for you to be truly limitless in what you do, that requires your time. So in order for you to discover that lack of barrier, those two things, health and wealth, need to be in place before you can even think about being limitless, because you're already limited if your health and wealth are limited.
Very well said. Very well said. Well, it's somewhere in our nature is that we are abundant and healthy, but then we somewhat forget or miss certain things or behave differently, are programmed. So this is somewhere the journey of remembering the right things and doing them and becoming them. Is there anything that you can see from your perspective for the next couple of years, or let's say 10 years? Do you feel that the narrative are going to be changed in terms of health and the longevity, or do you think that we are still like too much trapped in the mainstream? There is a little bit longer timeline that more people are going to become aware of the right things for them.
It's a really good question. I think after 2020 everything changed regarding quote unquote influencers and access to information, and people resorted to other sources that they might not have otherwise sought out, things where they were told not to trust, and they inherently became distrusting, there's that word again, because of what they saw in the world and what they felt themselves, despite being told to deny the evidence of their eyes and ears, as Orwell said in 1984.
Yes.
That was their final and most strongest command.
Yeah.
I definitely think the nature of the internet and conversations like this facilitate that. I cannot tell you how many people would think or would make fun of me. It's like, oh, you're crazy, you're just eating meat. And then years later, my friends are like, really? How is this going? And it's like, oh, you don't wear sunscreen? You're sitting in the sun for hours all day, but you don't burn? No seed oils? What's going on? Like, you're not one of those crazy guys, are you? And slowly but surely, these influences become mainstream after a while. This message gets through. But it only gets through because truth wins out. You cannot deny gravity. You cannot deny the sun. Propaganda can delay things for as long as possible. Power does what it does. But people will always act in their own interest, I think, and invent, especially when it comes to their health, that key of sovereignty, that tool of sovereignty. Again, permitting self-love, as we said before, that's another precondition. That will come around, I'm sure of it. And we'll go full circle. We'll go from eating cereal for breakfast to having normal foods for breakfast, or not even having breakfast at all. You and I understand the benefits of intermittent fasting and how that creates ketone bodies and all those things, flushes out the body, does all the work that bad food can't do for us. I think the future is bright for that space, but I'm a little bit concerned about, there is often like infighting, and there's a lot of prominent American influencers with hundreds of thousands of followers, even millions of followers, that often get each other's necks, and then people get tribal and it just splits, and that's exactly what the powers that be like. So that's why the message is a simple sun and meat. We can go a little bit further if we want to get cute with it. I think everyone has the same intention in that regard, and more people flock to it when they feel, when you're desperate, you look for answers, and if you can't find it conventionally, you look elsewhere. And if more and more people are doing it, hey, it must be good. Or you see the physical changes in people. You see, hey, like he looks really healthy, or she cured something, like, hey, I'm going to give it a go.
Yes, amazing. I absolutely love the whole philosophy or the view on health and life. I couldn't agree more. And I was challenged in this conversation, definitely, because there are many details and terms in the biology and physics that I can't catch up correctly, but the very simple logic of the things I can absolutely understand, and I feel the truth when I think and say them. And as you were saying, very powerful thing, the truth always comes out. So I also am the person who believes in the power of that. It's just a matter of time. And so I would really like to thank you so much for this conversation today. I truly believe that there is so much benefit information for others if they are willing to hear and listen, and they want to better their health, especially. I really appreciate that you were sharing your knowledge and your perspective and passion for helping also others to get this broader perspective on things. And I hope that today's conversation had inspired our listeners to think differently and ask more questions, become more intentional about the choices they make every day. And to everyone who is listening, thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who you think would benefit from this conversation.
Thank you, Jelena. Thank you for me the opportunity to speak my truth today. And I hope it resonates with people.
So until next time, stay curious, keep growing, and keep choosing to live limitless. We are sending you love from me and from Dawn.